Aloha and welcome to Cooper Union. Today we're looking at ecological ethics, activism, and justice now, Earth Day, Every Day in Hawai'i Nei, Aloha Aina Special Edition. It's an honor to be with three amazing activists in Hawaii that are working on a daily basis to promote and protect Earth rights here and around the world. It's exciting to have a program that's bringing together multiple stakeholders for sustainability. And we're commemorating today the 21st annual Earth Summit that we've hosted here in Hawaii, but also the 4th annual Earth Day at the Hawaii State Legislature. I'd like to begin with Lauren, and I'd like to ask you, what motivated you to join the movement for climate justice?
A few things. I would say, so hi everyone. I started my organizing work in the labor movement, so in economic justice and understanding about extractive capitalism and how its impact has been on working people. And so when learning about with like climate change and seeing like the same kind of treatment of an extraction from people and land, and really seeing that common denominator of the wealth and power divide that has been undermining the well-being of our planet, of our resources and ourselves. I feel like with climate justice, it is, intersectional and intertwining these things and really kind of taking our power back to save our planet, but really save ourselves from this, global economy we've been in. So in a nutshell, abstractly, that's what's really motivated me every day, is that the justice.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Lucy, what has motivated you to be part of the climate justice movement?
Yeah, I feel like it started pretty basic with education. I went to a middle school, SEEKS, the School for Examining Essential Questions of Sustainability, that really pushed me to think about sustainability and what it meant and real world applications of it. And I think from there, after my journey there, as I became a high schooler, it was really easy for the justice lens to kind of fall into that as I was starting to really apply that to organizing work. It seems like such a clear tie that, our world, we are facing a lot of big issues, but there are going to be people that are impacted more than others, and that needs to be addressed and thought about when moving forward.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And Dave, how about you? What motivated you to be involved?
Well, actually, it started as a child. I have Indigenous heritage, Lenape, Cherokee, Potawatomi, Miami, and for Indigenous people, Mother Earth is a living being. She has always been a living being. She is not like the Western societies see as a stone floating, out there in the universe. It's actually a living being, and so protecting our Mother Earth has been a part of my life, my entire life. How I got involved actively is in the 1960s. Martin Luther King inspired me, and I wanted to grow up to be like Martin Luther King. Of course, I couldn't, take on the civil rights because that's not my heritage. But the earth, protecting the earth and climate was just the natural, and I've been involved in this for decades.
Thank you so much, Dave. And what's really important, why I'm honored to bring everyone here to talk, is each one of you really are leaders in specific NGOs and environmental associations here in Hawaii. Maybe could you share what your NGO is prioritizing to protect the planet? Lauren?
Oh, certainly, sure. So I am the chapter organizer for the Sierra Club of Hawaii. And nationally and locally, we're definitely putting justice and equity at the center of everything we do within water rights, conservation, but really right now looking at the transition from the fossil fuel economy to a decarbonized and clean energy economy, and really ensuring that the same mechanisms and paradigm around, again, extractivism and basically the inherent inequalities, racial, gender, economic inequalities of the fossil fuel economy, not in trying to do better in the clean energy economy by addressing those. And so some of the things we're working on is an energy justice movement building, right? Because currently our entire energy system is having to transition, and our major provider, Hawaiian Electric, is having to, which is built in the 19th century, like old infrastructure, old way of doing things. I mean, it has even ties, it's like pre-overthrow era, like some of the key players in building Hawaiian Electric or key players in the overthrow. And I think that's really important to think about where the injustices lies in our energy system and how rooted they are, how influential and essential energy is in our daily lives, for people, again, to take the power back and to really think about how we're using our energy, where we are placing energy facilities, which communities are housing them, and really, again, trying to ensure community are part of the decision making. So there's community consent to ensure that everyday person benefits. We pay the highest electricity rates in the nation. And in the new energy economy, I mean, clean energy economy, we don't see any foreseeable rate decreases. And it's a for-profit driven system. It's top down. And we were trying to address that and really, again, do locally sourced, community created energy system. Like that's the transformation we like to see. Distributed benefits, distributed ownership.
Lauren, those are excellent points. And it also brings up the anniversary. Today is actually the Ecological Agreement, and it was actually the first regional environmental treaty to incorporate specific provisions protecting environmental human rights defenders. But it also has that important concrete provisions for advancing rights to information, participation, and justice in environmental matters. So that just entered into force in Latin America. And I think that really brings up some of the points that maybe we might need to have a Pacific version of the Ecological as well as the Orhouse conventions to then really connect the human rights and the environment and provides that holistic picture. Lucy, how about you? What is your organization involved with?
Yeah, so I'm the outreach director for Hawaii Youth Climate Coalition. So we are fully youth-led, and I feel like that's kind of one of the specifics of us, and we are focused on environmental justice. You know, it is our future that is on the line. We are the ones who are really going to have to be dealing with the impacts of the climate crisis. So it is important that we have our voices heard and that we are involved in that decision making and that we are rooting justice at the forefront of that. So we are working with the Sierra Club for energy justice colloquiums. You know, similarly, how do we stop the finance of dirty energy and, you know, other fossil fuel corporations and such. And having that, you know, centering ourselves around that is really important, and having those conversations. We're also trying to connect youth together across the island to understand environmental justice. You know, it's a hard thing to comprehend, and having that education is going to be really important if it's something that we want to focus on. And that's going to be really important going forward.
Thank you so much. And I know the youth have been very involved with the Friday activities. Is Hawaii still participating in those as well?
We're not specifically directly involved with those, no.
Okay. And Dave, how about you? I know you're with 350 Hawaii and with many other coalitions, as well as I know lots of meetings on Friday afternoon to try to keep track of the legislative cycle. What are some of the things that Hawaii 350 is doing?
Yeah, Hawaii 350, you know, climate's been our number one thing for a long, long time, decades, so to speak. And we helped, along with Sierra Club, to support the founding of the local youth climate movement. We also, last year, founded the Hawaii Climate and Environmental Coalition. So there's like 30 organizations now that have come together working on the climate and working together to get legislation passed. We're pretty excited. We have a climate emergency going to the legislature. It looks like it's going to pass, and if it does, it will be a landmark thing. We also have 512. It's like a double bucks program where to get going to the legislature. I think that is also passed. So folks who get SNAP will be able to get double the amount that they were getting before, which will help local farmers and help get produce to low-income people. So we also are the folks, mainly we've done a lot of different things. We do huge demonstrations and marches, thousands of people. We've gotten 1,000 people in the street here, as well as focusing on legislature to get legislation passed, and also focusing on indigenous communities. And we actually went to Standing Rock and we're there to support those folks and all the indigenous people in the Pacific and the youth. they are, you know, you and I may not be around when the worst part of climate change hits, but they will be. And so we're doing everything we can to mentor and help and support them, to give them the best future we can possibly can. So we're always, you know, we're here for them as a resource. I've been organizing for 50 years. So any support and Kavika Pegrin and Dyson Chi, some of the earlier folks with the youth climate movement here, we work very closely with them to help establish this group, because it's very important that we do everything we can to support them and help them get things done, and they can do it. And so I'm just really proud of Lucy and their whole crew. They're really great.
And really good point to bring up the Indigenous rights again. It's also the 20th session of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues taking place right now in New York. So Indigenous peoples all over the planet are coming together. And of course, it's an important aspect that you talked about the youth element, because the youth caucus of the Indigenous peoples is actually very strong. Dave, one more final question. One of the reasons we started doing Earth Day at the Hawaii State Legislature was it was such a good timing, you know, around the 22nd, roughly a week out before the legislative session usually closes. Is there any bill numbers or any things that we should call our elected officials on in this final week to put some moral added pressure? You've mentioned the climate emergency. You talked about another one you thought that was definitely coming through, but is there one or two pieces of legislation that people in Hawaii could call and put a little extra pressure for our planet?
Yeah, it's SCR 44. It's a climate emergency. They haven't totally passed it yet, and so they can call their senator and ask them to please vote for it. And you know, it looks like we're going to pass it, but anything can happen. So calling their personal legislator and asking them to please support the climate emergency SCR 44, that would be great. So they could do it with their representative as well as their senator.
Perfect. And then going back to Lauren, we're trying to think how people can get involved. What are some amazing actions for Aloha Aina in Hawaii people can do every day beyond Earth Day?
Yeah, Earth Day is every day. That's right. So, you know, that's a really interesting point. So I never mentioned, like, too, when I first got involved with the climate crisis, like I wasn't involved with the Sierra Club. I was just me and myself, and I was like, have the plant-based diet. I was doing that. Like, there's a lot of like individual actions that I think are important to align your values with your lifestyle. And so I will just draw people's attention to Project Drawdown, which kind of has it listed out, and it has like a global perspective as well, which is important. And I think just again, like how Lucy has and David is being active and engaged in our legislature and our city council, which is year round. I think the hard part about the legislature is you have this small window to like do so much. So I definitely think that finding ways to engage. I mean, Hawaii Youth Climate Coalition is an amazing org to get involved if you are youth. For us, Sierra Club, we have our social media and we have our Capital Watch as well, where people can just like look on a website and kind of see like what speaks to me, what would I like to get involved, because activists, organizers are always looking for people to get involved. And you know, one thing specifically though, as Lucy mentioned, is our energy justice colloquiums, which is once a month, and it's the last Thursday of every month, and we are focusing it on students, right? And it's a lot of peer-to-peer education. Lucy does an amazing job sharing, you know, this really important content that people just don't know how our energy system works. And so we're doing it in a way that it's interactive and participatory and community building. So that specifically is, again, once a month if you're a student, for sure. And then reach out to us on social media.
Sounds good. And really, you brought up a really good tool. I think Project Drawdown is such a great one. We actually are using that in our Indigenous Peoples class at University of Hawaii, West Oahu. And it's actually, we're including that in the curriculum. And it's a great way because some people always say, oh, what can I do? Or is there one thing that'll be able to solve the climate crisis? And Project Drawdown really does point out everything is interconnected and small, simple steps that many people can take. And I remember for one class we're doing where it's from the Lo'i Kalo to the United Nations, we're actually taking students from Hawaii to the UN. Really, the project Drawdown is the one that they see is the one that they can really mobilize and bring more of the students together around those steps. And one of them was around, if you really talk about issues like family planning, if you talk about reproductive rights, those two aspects coming together actually lower the carbon footprint so much that it's all these different ways of how we can work together and link up all of the rights. So those are really good points, Lauren. And thanks for bringing up Project Drawdown. I think they came out with a brand new curriculum of 6 classes now that people can utilize. And then it also shows over 100 actions. So that's a great tool that people can look at. Lucy, what do you think are some amazing actions for Aloha Aina?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to listening and learning, and then, understanding what the climate movement is, how it intersects with so many different fields, like you were saying, like family planning, women's rights, all of that, and like indigenous culture. And I think from there, then you can have discussions, and having those discussions and helping like others around you have those discussions is so important. I view our energy justice colloquiums as a really good like space to have these open discussions about, the climate crisis. What are steps to get there? How do we root that inside of justice? Because, it's a complicated matter and it's scary, and having community is so important. And I think building community and power in community is kind of the best step to take action. Individual action is also awesome, but in the end, we are also going to need that systemic change. And that can only happen through, building bottom up.
Really good points, Lucy. And it is people power, but also the one point you really raised us, even if all of us individually took our actions and did everything we could, we actually have to use the people power to force the corporations to actually change what they've been doing, because that's when they've made the systemic profits and they don't want to change. So people power is really good. And that definitely brings it to Dave, because I remember many marches and many activities that we've been on together on the front lines and taking more of a stroll approach for social justice lately and supporting youth. What are some amazing actions you think for Aloha Aina that people can do every day?
I think that you have to see it as organic. It's not one thing that you can do. I think you got to put your money where your mouth is. It is true that if I become a vegan tomorrow, I'm not going to stop the climate crisis. So no one should think that. But if everyone's working in that direction, then eventually we can do something about the climate crisis. So yes, take personal responsibility. Do everything you can, and whatever you're doing now. If you already have an electric car, then become a vegan. And if you've never written a letter to the editor, then write a letter to the editor, especially young people. And write an op-ed. When bills are coming to the legislature and the city council, testify. Our government is of, by, and for the people. It was designed that way. And if you don't participate, then the corporations just run amok and they take over and they get what they want. But every movement, everything that's ever changed in the United States, anything that's ever gotten better is because the people united, got together and demanded that change must happen now. That's how we got women's right to vote. That's how we got civil rights. That's how we ended slavery. All these things was because no politician ever changed anything. Never. It's always been the people. And so get involved with the group. Join 350 Hawaii. Join Sierra Club. Join Youth Climate Movement. Join groups. Support them. Put your money where your mouth is. Donate money. So I would say that whatever you're doing now, add one more thing, and then maybe in a few more months, add one more thing. And if you are living that lifestyle, and the people are going to ask you, well, why are you a vegan? Or why are you driving an electric car? That starts that conversation, because Greta Thunberg was just on the international news and she said that it's appalling, that the biggest problem is the majority of the people don't understand that we're already in a climate crisis. We're on the verge of the extinction of our species. And it's because the media is not covering it. And so we have to start that conversation on our social media and with each other. So there's several things, become a vegan, drive an electric car, write your letter to the editor and testify at the legislature. And when there is a march or a rally, come. 90% of organizing is just showing up. You know, just by having 1,000 people, 2,000 people, you don't have to do anything. Just show up, and that makes a huge difference to our legislature.
Those are really good points. Getting back to the initial points you raised about Indigenous rights, we need to decarbonize, we need to decolonize, and then also demilitarization as well. I know a lot of the work we do links that. The military carbon blueprint is a huge thing that we have to look at, and that has a role in Hawaii. And I know also with the militarization of the police, when you were there in Standing Rock, you can see that really the water defenders, the people who are just standing up for the most basic things, are always criminalized for just actually protecting our Mother Earth. And that really guides us.
Right. The U.S. military is the biggest polluter in the world. The U.S. military is the biggest fossil fuel user in the world. So if we could just cut the military budget, you know, our military budget is bloated, $750 billion or something. The U.S. is prepared to fight 2 World War IIs at the same time. We haven't had to fight World War II for 76 years. It's a bloated budget. It's a wasted budget. We have 800 bases around the world, and I think the next country that has the most is maybe Russia, and I think they've got 3. You know, so our military budget is bloated, and because of that, we don't have enough money for education. We don't have enough money for minimum wage. We don't have enough money for health care. So yes, cutting that military budget is essential.
And that is one of the most exciting things really in this 51st anniversary of Earth Day. You see a lot of civil society groups writing to celebrate Earth Day, but linking it to George Floyd, but linking it to the global situation. And it's really important that we have this conversation because even yesterday, the indigenous leader of the Nasa people, Sandra Pena, was actually killed and assassinated in Colombia. And it's just like what happened to other leaders who've stood up. So it really is important that you said, Dave, we come together and create that circle of compassion, that circle of conscience, that circle of creativity, and challenging the current system to make it better. We still have
scores of indigenous leaders every year are killed by the fossil fuel industry. They're murdered. And because it's in, you know, out and about back in Central America or South America, there's no way to prove what happened. They have death squads, and indigenous people are being murdered all the time. All those who stand up to protect their water, to protect their air, protect their land.
Absolutely. So it's standing in solidarity with indigenous peoples, and this is International Mother Earth Day as well, declared due to the work of the Bolivian plurinational government organizing at the UN. And it's been an exciting 2 days as well on the global level. There was a leaders summit on climate in Washington, D.C. Dave, one of the indigenous leaders from Chad, Hindu, who's on the permit forum, was invited to speak there as well. Just some initial reflections on President Biden's leaders summit on climate. Lauren, is there anything you'd like to say? I know that one thing that came out was we promised a new carbon emission reduction pledge, promising 50% reduction below 2005 levels by 2030. That was something that was a big step, of course, because really Hawaii has always been, we are still in. This is our 5th anniversary of Hawaii organizing. We are still in and having pre-meetings before the Conference of Party sessions. We know Glasgow will take place in November 1st through 12th. And for the first time ever, the nationally determined contributions, the NDC of every country, will be shared. And that was probably one big step up today. Biden did announce this is the United States NDC. And then at least we know what they've said, and then we know how to push, because we know, Dave, as you pointed out from Oceania, we're on the front lines already. The climate crisis is impacting Pacific Islanders. You see rising sea level, you see salinization of fresh water, you see all these issues impacting the right of self-determination, right to water, food, and health. Looking at that, Lauren, what do you think about President Biden's first step with this climate summit? And what are some things that we should be doing moving forward?
I do appreciate that we're making these goals to decarbonize. I think why it's important to think about justice and equity is because we still got to deal with the just decarbonizing our society, just as we're switching to fossil fuels, without dealing with the inherent equality with corporations and power, right? Ensuring they're accountable and dismantling that, right? How our institutions operate is also equally important. And I do want to uplift Shalonda Baker, who's like a scholar and energy justice advocate for decades. She's actually at the Department of Energy working on energy justice. And I think that's really important because she has a holistic lens, holistic approaches. And that is so important because our energy systems and our switch to renewables intersecting with how we use land. And just mentioning, again, how our land is precious and how different types of renewable energy on ag land is that we have food insecurity, we have housing affordability issues, high cost of living. If we're not approaching it from all angles, right? It's not just decarbonizing. I would say that, like, holding Biden accountable and our local institutions accountable to holistic approaches to solutions.
So we need to keep going with the voluntary local review and push harder. Lucy, any comments?
Yeah, I think it shows that that the national conversation is moving kind of the right direction, but ultimately it's still, these choices are still coming from the same system that has put us in these, rough positions already. And I think it's important to recognize where their values stand a lot of time. It's very status quo-y still, and it's going to be really important that we're looking at it deeper than the surface level and making sure anything we do want to implement benefits all people. And I think even here we've seen examples where renewable energy isn't always best for a community. That's why those decisions have to be made by the community and rooted in them if we really want to make change. So I think national push is really important, but it's important that we keep rooting that in those communities that are going to be making these changes.
Point. I really liked what you said earlier. It's really 3 steps. It's listen, learn, and then lead, and everyone coming together. Dave, in our final minute, it is stunning because they do measure the world's carbon level from Mauna Loa, and it did pass 420. And so what do you think what we can do to that sense? I think the one thing that did come out of the summit was a sense of urgency, and also that we have to go to 1.5 degrees to stay alive. What are your initial reflections as we close out today?
I have no confidence in Biden at all. Obama had 8 years and he talked big about climate, but did absolutely, in fact, he expanded fossil fuel extraction in the United States greater than any other president in the history of the world. And so Biden can say whatever he wants. We have to see action from him. So I say, don't pay any attention to what he says. Force him to act. And that's the only way we're going to get any change.
Perfect. So that's how we close it out. It's people power to protect the planet. And we call on everyone to participate. And thank you so much for joining us today with our Aloha Aina special edition. Mahalo.